Welcome to today's webinar on the Wyoming Retirement System. It will be presented by George Eason.
Hi, this is George. Some of you might know who I am. We normally try to visit all the areas out about 3 or 4 times a year. And so we do appreciate the agencies that let us stop by. I'm here today basically just to answer a whole lot of questions that you might be having, especially with some of the changes with the statutes that we have to abide by. One way I'm going to start is just talk about some of the basic things that should have happened already. And then a lot of the rules that we follow are in the Wyoming Retirement Act, which is available on the websites you can go to. And again, if you have any questions, please ask the questions. You might not like my answer, but I'll give you the answer that should be the same answer for everybody if they're in the same situation. The problems with the libraries is all the libraries aren't run exactly the same way in the state of Wyoming. So what the correct answer for one library might not be the right answer for the other libraries. So if you have specific questions, please ask. The first thing, when the libraries first joined the retirement system, for the ones who are in the system, each entity had to sign what we call a participation agreement form. It's a WRS-32, and they are on file with our office. So if you're a new director, and you don't know what your agreement says, you can always give us a call, and we can send you a copy of the agreement. Because the basic important part of the agreement is the entity dictated to us what you constitute as a regular employee and what you constitute as a part-time employee, or we call regular part-time. And the reason this is important is because if you offer our pension system, all full-time employees have to participate. Part-time people have to, and consider regular part-time people, they have to participate as well. And that's where the major problem is, what constitutes a regular part-time person. Well, if in the agreement form that the library signed when you first joined our system, we did allow each entity to indicate what they consider part-time. If an agency did not indicate what they consider part-time, the agency has to abide by what we consider regular part-time. And what regular part-time is, what we hold, is anybody that works more than 25 hours a week on a regular basis. And so what that means is if in your agreement you designated somebody as 30 hours a week as regular part-time, we would abide by that. If you didn't designate what's regular part-time, you have to go by the 25 hours a week. If you designated something less than 25 hours, you can still use that. Okay? Let's say you put 20 hours as regular part-time, then you would have to go by the 20 hours. So I'm going to open up the questions. Does anybody have any questions about what regular part-time, who should be covered, who shouldn't be covered?
This is Lucy. I have a question.
Okay, Lucy.
All right. We have defined regular part-time people a couple of different times, and it seems that Wyoming Retirement System periodically changes the rules so that we have to redo it again. So how long will the definition that we've now done to accommodate the latest change be in place before we have to look at doing this again?
The only time it could be changed is if the state legislators change the statute. The problem in the past was that the WR system didn't always abide by the statutes. Well, we should have been, and we have to be. And so what the statutes state is regular part-time is 25 hours or more a week. But in your agreement, if the agreement that you have already designated a part-time, you don't have to make a change. The thing is,
that's not what we were informed, because we did have agreements in terms of, and we had proof of what we were defining as a regular part-time employee, and we were told that we had to change it.
Can you tell me who told you to change it?
Well, I don't know her name. One of the ladies in the office, I think she may be on maternity leave now. Do you have somebody on maternity leave?
We had somebody just get back. Aaron?
Okay. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Our business office dealt with.
Okay. Because if you have a ongoing agreement, and there was an agreement that was signed when you originally participated, if in that agreement you designate something less than what we constitute as regular part-time, you can continue to do that. Only if you did not designate in the agreement what was regular part-time, you have to abide by our rules. And so if you've already designated somebody as 20 or 30, and that's what the agreement says that we have, then you can go by that. You don't have to change it. The only time it has to be what we consider regular part-time, which is 25 hours, is if you did not have an agreement that designated what you consider regular part-time. And so I will check with Erin when I get back in the office. She's away, we call her external auditor and stuff, and I'll let her know. Lucy, what library are you with?
Laramie County Library System.
Okay. So when I get back in the office after the presentation, I will talk with Erin, and I will pull up your agreement that we have on file and any past agreement, and then I will have a meeting with Erin to find out what she told you, and then I will get back to you to let you know what the correct answer is. The correct answer should be if you have an agreement with designated part-time hours, that's the agreement that we originally entered in with you. That's what we have to go by. Only if it wasn't designated can we make that change.
Okay, and we also had some people who previously had been grandfathered in under a previous agreement we'd had that we were informed we could no longer have in that manner. And we had 3 employees left under that previous agreement. We were also told that they could no longer be grandfathered in. So we have now changed that also. And my concern is, we've made these changes, so we've done what you've asked, but my concern is that what's going to happen down the road.
There shouldn't ever be a change from the WRS system on any of the statutes. Because the only person who can change the statutes or the ruling of the statutes are the state legislators. So only if they go through the process to either change the statute or add a new one would things have to be changed. And to be honest with you, I can't tell you if they're never going to do it or if they're going to do it or whatever. But right now, there's no indication of us changing what we consider regular part-time, because we have to have our rules to be the same for everybody in the same situation, and we can't keep changing them because it's hard for the agencies to abide by the rules if they don't know what the rules are.
Right. Well, I would agree with you on that.
Okay. And before this meeting, over the last 2 days, I've met with the Attorney General's office, our director, our operations manager, our external internal auditor, and our active section, Gwen James. So we got all the information together. So hopefully what I'm telling you, not hopefully, it should be, what I'm telling you should be what any of the other departments or persons you talk to underneath our agency should be telling you the exact same thing. So for all the libraries out there, if you're getting information different than what we cover, call me, and I'll get it fixed.
Hey, thank you.
Sure.
George, we have a couple of text questions here, and Kristen asked, how often can you change your part-time agreement?
To be honest with you, if you have an agreement with us, that's the agreement. If you want to make a change to the agreement to increase coverage for your employees, you can always do an amendment, but it has to be at least the minimum of what we require. In other words, if say you do regular part-time at 30 and you want to cut it back to 25, you can do that. If you want to cut it back to 15 hours, you cannot do that. You can't go less than what we have unless you already have an agreement in place right now or as of July 1st.
Okay. The other question is where in the statutes is this 25 hours defined? Or is that in the statutes?
I'm looking it up right now. I brought the Wyoming Retirement Act with me. The problem is I'm not real familiar with that part.
That's Kristen in Carbon County.
Kristen, can I get back with you on that? And I'll let you know the exact statute number.
I'll look when you
Okay.
Okay.
On that one. To be honest with you, I think that's a brand new statute that was a ruling by the Attorney General's office. But I will find out exactly where it's in the statute because it should be in the statute and let you know.
Well, if that's an Attorney General thing, that doesn't sound like a statute.
Well, the Attorney General...
I applaud Wyoming Retirement from following the statutes. I mean, that's what we all have to do.
Right.
But we all know that the statutes are just the start of how we create our rules.
Correct.
And I think there's more to Wyoming Retirement's rules than statutes. So where's this 25 hours defined? I've looked through the statute, and maybe I missed it, but I don't think it's there. So where is Wyoming Retirement getting the rest of its rules from?
Good question. Jamie's looking into the statutes right now, see if he can find it. If not, I'll get back to everybody and let them know exactly where the statutes are written, or if it was an Attorney General's ruling of permanent part-time, or if it was the IRS ruling of permanent part-time, or what you call regular part-time.
The next text question is, what about employees who have grant-funded hours? Do we have to provide WRS on those grant-funded hours? What if the grant didn't fund WRS? So if somebody is employed on grant funds, do you still have to cover them?
No.
Okay. And George is looking that up right now.
It says, if an employee who is compensated as an independent contractor or on a fee basis, or is reimbursed for a per diem basis, or his term is less than 6 months, or...
Susan, a question for you: Is that person a permanent employee who's just paid with grant funds, or is that person only an employee because of the grant?
Employees who have regular hours as well as grant-funded hours. We've got a Department of Health youth engagement grant, for instance.
I see.
So would they be would they can be?
And it's more than this grant has gone on, this is approaching its third year.
And what's the person's salary, annual salary?
Oh, the annual salary, they're all hourly. We've got like 3 or 4 of them. Nobody at our place makes very much money. Let's say it's less than $20,000 a year. That's off the top of my head. I don't have the budget here in front of me.
If you classify them as a regular employee, regardless of where the funding comes from, you have to cover them. But if they're considered an at-will employee, and they're at will at the grant's discretion, then they don't have to be covered.
We don't have at-will employees at Albany County.
Okay, then yeah, you have to cover them, regardless of where the funding comes from.
Thank you.
Okay, another question is, what is the definition of eligible employee?
It's in the state statutes. It's 93402 subsections VII. It talks about what a member is, full-time or regular part-time, and it basically states that members means and includes any full-time or regular part-time employee of an employer, including substitute teachers for teachers. We'll set that. Or as a regular part-time employees but not includes independent contractors at fee basis. So what the statute basically covers people who aren't qualified. And so if you have an employee that it doesn't meet one of the things that is not qualified, then of course they have to be qualified.
Okay. The statute distinguishes between county employees and other government employees for part-time employment. How does WRS define county employees?
Any member that works for the county and is considered a county employee with county benefits is basically a county employee. And where we come into problems with that is like Natrona County. Natrona County Library is part of Natrona County itself. And their statutes state, or their guidelines state, the library has to abide by all the rules as a county entity. So they would be considered county employees. Campbell County just absorbs their library, and now their employees are considered county employees as well. If your library has its own board, its own funding, and stuff like that, and it does not have to abide by county rules based on the county designation, then you're not considered county employees. And so there's only a few libraries that we would consider county employees, and the two that come in mind again are Natrona County and Campbell County. Campbell County just did. But if you're your own entity, even if you get funding from the county, but you're your own entity with your own board, your own HR, your own benefits, then you're not considered a county employee. If you think you're a county entity, you can submit documentations to us from the county itself. And in that documentation, the county has to designate the library as a county entity. And if they do that, you would be considered a county employee. If the county does not designate you as a entity underneath the county itself, then you're not. Now, I don't know how long the Campbell County thing is going to be in play, but that's the way it is right now. And when this comes into plays like Converse County. Converse County doesn't participate in the pension system. So can Converse County Library participate? If you're part of the county itself, the answer is no, because the county doesn't participate. But if you're your own entity with your own board, your own rules, your own benefits, then basically you could.
And George,
I think that's, this is Deb Adams, I think that's an interesting designation because everybody here is board, pretty much, is appointed by the county. So to say that we have our own board is kind of misleading to me.
But the county, in the county documentation, if they designate the library as part of the county itself, you're a county employee. If the county doesn't designate the library as a county entity, then you're not considered a county employee. And that's what Natroni County did, and that's what Campbell County just did.
And in Albany County, we have a letter from a previous county attorney saying we are not county employees and we don't have to publish our wages in the paper because separate benefits, separate policy, and a separate board. And so I think, George, what you're going to discover is it varies by county, as you said.
Exactly correct. That's why there's no one right answer for most of the questions that you have. It's based on your specific rules and regulations.
George, could you just re-mention the statute number so folks can look that up on their own?
The main retirement act is called, the short title is called the Wyoming Retirement Act, which is statutes 9-3-402. And what's considered an eligible employee is under subsections VII, which talks about member means, includes any, and it lists all what covers, and then it specifically says what's not considered a member. So if you look for your employee, like the grant question, it doesn't specifically tell me that grant people are not considered an employee, which would imply that they are considered an employee. One thing I'd like to address is the operations manager, Rose Todd. I talked to her this morning, and there was a library who wants to cover a specific group of part-time employees or non-regular employees, and they have about 15 hours of employment per month, or per week. Per week. If an agency covers employees that only work 15 hours a week, then they have to cover all employees that work 15 hours or more per week. They can't split it up. Well, this group will be covered, this group will not. So if a library or any agency that designates a group of people based on hours worked, they have to cover everybody underneath that agency that works the same amount of hours or more. In other words, let's say you have regular part-time at 25 hours a week, but you're going to cover somebody that only has 20 hours a week, then you have to cover everybody that has 20 hours. You can't pick and choose.
Another question is, can we go from covering everyone to covering only people working more than 10 hours a week? So if they're currently covering everyone...
If you're covering everyone right now and you only want to cover people that works 10 hours or more a week, yes, you can do that. So people that work less than 10 hours a week won't be covered. You don't have to cover those people. But if you cover 10 hours or more, then yeah, you can do that. Because you're covering more than what's required. And as long as you want to cover more than what's required, as long as you treat all of them exactly the same way, then you can do that.
And again, George, to repeat, what is required is that any regular part-time employee who works 25 hours or more has to be covered.
Unless the agreement that we already have states that you cover somebody above 25 hours is what you consider regular part-time. Correct.
Okay.
So if you cover everybody and you don't want to cover everybody, only 10 hours or more a week, yes, you can do that. Because the way your employees gather benefits from us is we consider full-time for the pension system anything more than 86 hours a month. So even if you have an employee that say works 24 hours a week and you cover that person, we would still consider that person a full-time employee for the pension system because they work more than 86 hours a month. That's why last March we made it mandatory, which it should always been, but we started enforcing it, where each agency has to report hours worked for each of your employees. And the reason that came into play is because we have to know if the person qualifies for a full month of service or a partial month of service. And that's where those numbers come into play.
Okay. Missy wants to know, who does she contact to get a copy of their agreement?
The lady's name is Gwen James. Her last name is James, James. She's the head of the active or agencies, and you can contact her. She should have a copy of your agreement, and she can forward it to you by either fax it to you, email it to you, or mail a copy to you in the mail. I would suggest that if for all the libraries, if you don't have a current agreement or know what the agreement says, you should contact Gwen to get the agreement that's written. And again, if you want to cover more than what's required, you can do that. You just can't cover less than what's required. If you in the past have not covered everybody that you should have covered, you don't really need to worry about having a fine or a penalty or anything like that. Okay? Just from now on, we want you to cover the people that's mandatory to cover, at least. And as long as we get those people on the books so they can start earning their benefits, is what we're basically looking for.
Now, George, if there is somebody in that situation where they should have covered somebody, but they haven't been,
Yes.
are they going to be assessed back to the day that that person they should have been covered started?
That's a good question. To be honest with you, if there was somebody that's supposed to be covered that wasn't covered, and you find out that they wasn't covered, for the sake of the member, of your employee, you can catch up their contributions, but I really don't think that's going to be enforced that you have to catch up. Let's say they've been with you for 5 years. We're not going to make you pay 5 years worth of benefits. But if it went back just to July 1st, then they can make you catch up from July 1st.
Okay, another question that we have here is there any chance of changing the definition of a temporary employee?
I would have to know what you mean by temporary employee. If they work less than 25 hours a week and they don't work on a regular basis, then you don't need to cover that person because they're not considered a regular member. So if you have a temporary employee, like just comes in and whenever you need help or something like that, then of course you wouldn't have to cover that person. But the problem is if you decide to cover a person like that, then you have to cover everybody in that category or above that category.
Susan, did you want to elaborate on your situation any?
Sure. We have a vacancy. We have a department head missing, a technical services person, and so I have hired people. I've got somebody who's coming in and cataloging 20 hours a week, and I've got a professional coming in, I don't know, 7 hours a month or something like that. And our understanding was if they'd been employed for more than 6 months, they were no longer temporary employees, even though they're not in real jobs. Once we get a technical services person hired, they will be terminated.
We've sent a spreadsheet detailing how much time they've worked since they started that we had before we began paying for them at the 6-month point. We've not yet been billed, however.
Did you hear that? Betsy Moore, the administrative service manager, has sent that spreadsheet to Gwen
Maybe.
to to someone
Okay.
for those.
It's probably with either Renee or Debbie. I will check with that. But the person who comes in like every once in a while, 7 hours, there's no reason you would have to cover that person at all. Even if they've been there for 12 years. I mean, you wouldn't have to cover the person because they don't classify as a regular member of the system.
But you're not paying attention to our contract, which says we're going to cover all our employees.
Well, then if your contract says that, I don't have your contracts in front of me, but if your contract says you cover everybody, then you have to cover everybody.
I have our contract in front of me.
Okay, and your contract says you cover everybody that works for the library?
Yes. But we do.
But are you hiring the person through a temporary agency?
No.
Okay.
I mean, they're not a Kelly Service employee or something like that.
Okay.
And then we might be hiring, it's possible that we would hire an outside person for grant-funded hours that only amount to 2 or 3 a month, and that it would be a year-long grant. So if they aren't already on staff.
This is a good question, to be honest with you. What library is Susan with?
Albany.
Albany County? Susan, let me get back with you on that question, because based on my understanding of the statutes is if you say you have to cover that you will cover everybody, as long as they're not a temp from an outside agency, you have to cover them. But to be honest with you, I would look at amending your agreement to cover just the people that we require you to cover. And then if you want to start covering people below what's required, you can amend the contract to cover specifically what you would consider employees of the library itself. The problem is if the current agreement says you have to cover everybody, then you have to cover everybody unless they work for a temp agency. So what I would look at, possibly talk to your board, of course, but look at maybe amending the agreement to cover what's required and then go down from there what you want to cover. That might make the most sense.
You. Yes, I see what you're saying. We'll talk about that. Thank you, George.
Sure.
Okay. Another question that came in is if we cover all employees, even those that work 10 hours per week, why does it have to be mandatory for those employees? Why can't it just be optional? Where is it written that it has to be mandatory?
That's part of what we call safe harbor rules by the IRS. So you'd have to go to the IRC code book. ERISA states that every employee has to be treated the same. And so what happens is if you decide to cover one, you have to cover everybody in that category. You can't pick and choose because then you're not abiding by safe harbor rules. And so the ERISA Act of 1974 from Social Security, IRS indicates that you have to treat all employees the same. And state statutes cannot override IRC code.
Now, what if, George, what if an employee doesn't want the retirement?
It doesn't matter. It's not optional. That's why it's important to understand that if they're classified to as a member or an employee based on our rules or your rules, everybody has to be treated in that category. So they can't pick and choose who wants to participate and who doesn't want to participate. So if you cover 10 hours per week, even if somebody works, say, 11 hours or 12 hours and don't want to participate, they don't have that option. That's why it's real important that if you're going to go less or cover more than what's required, everybody has to understand that every employee that's covered has to be covered the same.
Okay, George, this is Kristen, and I still don't get it. If you're offering the benefits, you are treating everybody the same.
If they decline.
If they decline, and they've still been offered the benefit. So I'm missing something in the logic.
I'm trying to come up with the exact wording for this. They don't have an option to decline. I mean, that's the rule. They don't have an option to opt out. If they are classified in the statutes as a regular part-time or a covered employee, as that group, they have to participate. They can't pick and choose. So if you consider your benefit from the library and you cover, based on the agreement, all employees, then you have to cover all employees. They can't opt out. That's part of them being hired by the agency, is they have to go by the rules of that agency. They can't pick and choose. Like with health benefits. Some agencies will allow people not to accept the coverage for health, and they'll pay them more money for not having the benefit. The retirement system doesn't work that way. If they're classified by the statutes as an employee, or what we call a member, then they all have to be treated the same, which means you have to pay them, and money has to come out of their paycheck to cover that group of people. That's where it comes into play, that if you want to cover people less than what's required, all of them have to be the same thing. They cannot opt out. It's not an optional situation.
Other questions for George? Is there anything else you want to cover?
Let's see. Oh yeah. A lot of times statutes won't cover every situation, because there's no way the statute would be so big you couldn't fit them in a building to cover every possible situation. So the way the WRS system works is if we get a situation that's outside the norm, we have to go to the Attorney General's office to get rulings on what's required and what's not required, what we have to do, what we not have to do. And they have lawyers that work, I don't know how they come up with their decisions, but whatever decision they come with is basically what we have to use. If for some reason you don't agree with the ruling, there are some procedures you can go through to try to get the ruling overturned or changed. One way of doing that is by contacting the WRS director and go through the procedures to do that. Everybody sometimes has an opinion based on how they interpret the statutes and stuff. So if there's a ruling by somebody in the WRS system that you don't agree with, you can always go through the director and go through the grievance procedures to try to get it ruled a different way to help your situation. But the main thing is, get a copy of the agreement, and if the agreement doesn't designate regular part-time and you say you're going to cover everyone, then you're basically stuck in that situation unless you amend your agreement. And you can't amend the agreement to cover just what's required and then go backwards to cover people that you want to cover that doesn't meet the qualifications or that's lower than what's required.
And George, how easy is it to amend your agreement?
If you want to go more strict than what you're doing now, it's not that hard of a process. All you do is request an amendment from Gwen James. She'll give you the procedures. It's basically your board, the library board or whoever's in charge of the library will sign the new agreement designating stuff, and as long as or it's just at the minimum of what's required, then you're okay. The only time it would be a problem is if you want to go more strict than what we required.
Okay, there are other questions for George.
The only other thing, when we do visit the area, we normally send an email or letter out to all the agencies that offer the pension or the 457 program. If you're having concerns or questions about procedures, let one of the retirement educators know, and we can stop by your office and try to help answer your questions or get your specific situations, and then when we come back to Cheyenne, get it addressed and get a ruling sent to you. But one thing you need to understand, because in this state, all libraries are not the same. The rules and regulations are not the same from one library to the next. And that's where we're having a lot of problems is people say, well, this library does this, how come we have to do this? And a lot of it just has to do with that original agreement form.
This is Deb Adams, and I don't have a copy of my agreement in front of me, but you just mentioned deferred compensation.
Yeah.
So it just raised a question I hadn't thought of. So I get what you're saying about the retirement contribution. So does the agreement also apply to who can participate in deferred compensation, or can anybody participate in deferred comp? Or does that fall under the same rules as the retirement contribution?
If you're a library that already has because with the 457 program, with the deferred comp program, the agency, when it first participated, signed a resolution letter or resolution form indicating that you abide by the rules of the 457 program itself, and you should have received a plan document at the time. If you offer the 457 program, of course you can continue to do that. The problem is libraries were never supposed to have been eligible to participate in the 457 program. To be able to participate in the 457 deferred comp program, you have to be able to levy taxes. And that rule was not always enforced by the previous directors of the WRS system. The IRS says we have to enforce that rule. So if you're not part of the system already, you cannot participate right now based on the ruling of the Attorney General's office. We're trying to have them review that because we didn't like the answer we got either. So if you're already in the program, you can stay in the program. But if you're not in the program, you're not be able to participate. And I don't like that answer either. But that's
okay. I don't actually think I may not have worded my question correctly.
Okay.
So I was just trying to determine whether, because I think we have a couple people who are part-time. They're like substitutes, and they've chosen to participate in the 457 plan. That doesn't conflict with the fact that they're not covered under the retirement contribution.
No, it does not.
Okay.
Yeah, if they don't qualify for the pension, but you offer the 457 and they want to participate in that, as long as they are not seasonal employees and they get a permanent regular paycheck that will cover at least their contribution amount that they elected on a monthly basis, they can participate.
Okay. Okay. So they have to get enough of a paycheck to cover their monthly.
Right. In other words, just say they work every once in a while. 1 month they work, next month they don't, then they can't participate. But if they work every month and they get at least $20 per pay period, then they can participate.
Okay.
Are there other questions, even deferred comp questions?
This is Kristen. I want to clarify on the deferred comp.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good question, so thanks for asking it. But George, you said, like Carbon County Library, we're already participating in the 457.
Right.
But new employees that come on board can still participate, correct?
Yes, they can.
Grandfathered agencies, not grandfathered employees.
That's exactly correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're trying to get a ruling that all libraries can participate, but the Attorney General did not come up with the same ruling that we wanted, so we are looking at them revisiting that decision. Let me give everybody my direct phone line, too. So if you have a question or a follow-up question, something you didn't think about now, you want to call me. My direct line, of course, is area code 307, and the number is 777-7266. And you can always give me a call. I travel a lot, so if you get my voicemail, just leave a message, and I'll get back with you.
What's Glenn James's phone number?
I don't know her direct line, but the main line is 777-7691. And the three people that y'all should be talking to mostly is Gwen James with the agreements or anything dealing with contributions and stuff like that. Our operations manager is Rose Todd. She has the most experience with the retirement system. And then our external auditor, her first name is Erin, E-R-I-N. I can't remember what her last name is because she's pretty new. She was gone for a while for maternity leave. She's the one that's supposed to be talking to the agencies if there's any problems and stuff like that. Those are the three main people. But if you get an answer that doesn't agree with what you think, you can always take it up to the higher authority, which is our assistant director, Harry Wells, or our director, Tom Williams. And then again, if it's not in the statute and we indicate something outside of the statutes because it's not covered, all of our decisions are based on what the Attorney General says their understanding of the statutes are. Again, sometimes y'all might want a written ruling. I'm sure the Attorney General's office shouldn't have any problems with put it in writing what they tell us over the phone. So if that's the situation, give us a call and we can get with the Attorney Generals and see if they put it in writing what they determined was the correct answer to that whatever question came up. But the main thing I'd like you to come from this presentation is all libraries are the same. The agreement's the main thing that we go by, and the state statutes. And if you offer a benefit to one employee, all employees in that same category have to, and the category is by hours, not by title, have to be covered.
And George, this is Kristen. I would really like to see that if a benefit's offered to one employee, it's offered to all, and that by hours. I'd like to see where that's written. I'd like to see whatever IRS code, wherever that you guys get that from, because
that they have to participate whether they want to or not.
Yeah, I'm just still scratching my head over that one. I'd like to see where you got that from.
It's basically the statutes list what a member is, and then it says everybody's classified as a member unless they fall under these other categories. And if they don't fall under one of the other categories that's listed as not a member, then they have to participate in the pension. And so basically the statutes list specifically what's not considered a member, or who can be covered, and anybody that doesn't meet one of those that's not covered automatically has to be covered. So I will check with Rose Todd when I get back to make sure the determination is the same, and she can forward anything that previous ruling that's not in the statutes.
This is Frances Clymer in Cody, and I've been in touch with Rose about the question of whether the library can handle part-time employees in the retirement plan differently from the county, because that question came up with the county this year. And she got a hold of someone in the Attorney General's office. I don't have anything in writing, but she did get an answer. And the answer was, because the library is a separate operating unit, the county's choice regarding part-time employees is not binding upon the library or vice versa. And this is the first confirmation that I'd gotten that we could do our retirement differently from the county, which was the question that the county had. Well, the county doesn't cover part-time people, therefore you can't. Well, apparently we can.
Yeah, and Francis, your situation is that way. And most other libraries should be the same answer to that, because you're not considered a county employee. You can do what you want as long as you go by at least the minimum that we require, which you do, of course. You actually cover more than what's required and stuff. So your situation is exactly that. You don't have to cover. You can cover part-time, even though the county doesn't, because you're not considered a county employee. But when Trona County and Campbell County, that would not be the correct answer.
And also, we have an existing agreement with the Wyoming Retirement System.
Correct.
Because we have had an existing agreement in force for many, many years.
Yes, I can.
Correct.
Fine. How can I help you?
I think Isabel's taking a reference question now. Are there any other questions right now? Okay, well, I'd like to thank George for coming today. Hopefully his answers are to your liking. And if not, you do know where to contact him or Gwen or Aaron. And like George's been saying all morning, and like he said to both Leslie Boughton and I, they are more than willing to work with you and answer all your questions.